Welcome everybody to another 15-minute Feature Friday. Today I'm going to discuss configuring an Xbox controller as a joystick. So after I sent out this invite, I was informed that this was one of those not well-known features that was brought up at MIPS, and so I got a little bit nervous thinking, somebody already covered this topic, but in kind of doing a little bit of research, I didn't see where anybody had actually put together a guide or a video on how to configure your Xbox controller as a joystick, but there was a video showing a demonstration of using the Xbox controller as a joystick. So today we'll get into how to actually configure it for your use. So I think the first thing that we should probably talk about is why an Xbox controller, right? So probably one of the easier things is most people that have to or are hired as folks in a SOC or in a observation role for video are younger because it's an entry-level job, right? And the one thing I can tell you about the younger generation is they're all familiar with the controllers, be it PlayStation, Wii, Xbox. So this is going to be very, very familiar for them. It's not a new learning curve, and it'll be really easy for them to adapt to. Second thing is the lower cost, right? So these Xbox controllers go for somewhere between $50 and $100, depending on the style and the type and that kind of stuff. Third thing is it doesn't have to come from a specific manufacturer. You don't have to be a dealer for it, like you would for an Axis or for a Pelco or one of those guys. This is something that's readily available. You can run to your local Walmart, to your Best Buy, and pick one up today. One of the neatest things that I think this adds as a capability is it adds some range and mobility to being able to control your PTZ through wireless capability, right? So if we connect this thing wirelessly, we can probably be 30 to 40 feet away from the monitors and still be able to control those guys. One of the other things is that it's not going to take up a whole lot of desk space, right? It's fairly compact. When you don't need it, you can throw it in a drawer. And when you do need it, pull it out of the drawer, hit the button, you start up. And one of the most important things that I didn't list here is it gives a good business case for having an Xbox controller in your office, right? So most Windows 10 machines at this point come with Xbox Live app already installed. I know it's usually outlawed with group policy, but hey, at least you have a fighting chance to have a little fun later. So let's roll into what's really required, right? So you can use this Xbox controller as a joystick as long as the PC that you're working on is operating on Windows 7, 8, or 10, right? So 7 and 8 have a little bit of a different install, and today we'll take a look at how we install on 10, but it's just a slightly different flavor. Setup instructions are completely available on the web. If you go to Xbox website, they actually take you through the whole setup of how to add this controller to your PC. There are two different types of controllers out there for the Xbox One controller. There's a standard controller, which is still wireless, but not Bluetooth. And then there's the S controller, which is Bluetooth. So when we look at our Xbox controller, if you look at the top unit, you'll see that the bezel kind of extends over the Xbox button. And that will tell you that is a standard controller. It's still wireless, but it's not Bluetooth. So if you're going to use that Xbox controller, then you have a couple of options, right? You either have to connect it via USB. Both of those controls have USB, or you have to buy a wireless adapter that plugs into your USB port and allows you to use that controller. Your second option, you still have, which would be the Xbox controller S. You still have that USB connection port, but you now have the capability of pairing natively with Bluetooth. And so with that, those are the kind of the big things that we needed to kind of take a look at before we actually jumped into what it looks like to set it up. So first thing I'm going to show you is where it is in Windows settings. So remember, again, we're on a Windows 10 machine, and I actually took my controller and also paired it wirelessly, but for our demonstration today, I am going to use the USB just to avoid any wireless gremlins that could jump into this thing. When adding this guy, it will show up, right? So if we go back to that presentation real quick here. And we see this little button down here for Bluetooth. If we hit that guy, it becomes discoverable. When we see it on our settings page here, we click it, it automatically pairs, right? So very simple process. If we hook it up with USB, as soon as you plug it into the port, it will go out to the web, find the driver for it, and it'll automatically configure it for you. Once we have that device, that controller configured for our PC, then we can move into Smart Client. Once we're in Smart Client, we have to go up here to this little arrow up here, and we go to Settings, and then we go over to Joystick. In here, this first box up here will allow you, if you have multiple joysticks, so maybe you do have a traditional USB joystick, and this controller, this will allow you to select which one you're going to configure. And this will allow you to decide which function will be assigned to each axis. So in this case, the y-axis is tilt, x-axis is pan, and then our trigger buttons happen to be zoom. So the other thing you can do is you can test. So if I go x-axis to the left, you can see that it turns completely white. To the right, it turns completely blue. Right? If I go up, same thing. Down, same thing. So you can kind of see what's going on there. Right? Zoom, zoom. So you can kind of see what buttons you're dealing with. So the way that I configured this Xbox controller with the buttons down here is button 1 happens to be our A button on the controller. Button 2 happens to be our B button. Button 3 happens to be our X button. Button 4 happens to be our Y button. And so moving to the next view item, we'll kind of go through a demonstration here in a second, but that moves us up, down. It gives us some control within our view to move from camera to camera to camera to camera, right? If we look at the other buttons, we can start. So these are the top right above your trigger buttons. These are the playback buttons, so you can go reverse on the left-hand side and forward on the right-hand side. Now, all these are configurable, and I should probably say that anything in this list, you can configure your Xbox controller to perform. Lastly, I've also set it up so that we can toggle between playback and live. And of course, if we're doing playback and we're using those trigger buttons, we need to be able to stop that playback at one point or another. So with that being said, let's just take a look at how this operates within the window. So typical mouse, right? We have our mouse here, and this is an actual little PTZ that I've got hooked up to my system. Looks out in my backyard over the fence, and you can see that, typical mouse actions, right? Wheel zooms it in or zooms it out. And we have those kind of options. Now, if we move to the Xbox controller, same thing, trigger zooms it in, trigger zooms it out, right? We can pan, tilt. Tim just asked a question. So Tim asks, would those actions in that list ever include MIP functions, i.e. integration actions? Tim, I don't know that would be something I could answer at this point. I would imagine if it has anything to do with joysticks control, it would have some compatibility with it, but I guess it would depend on what that integration looked like. So the other thing that we did is we talked about being able to select a window. So if let me click back on this. Okay, so if we go here, we go to the right, we can go up. So these are my A, B, X, Y buttons, remember? So now I can select any one of these windows. I can zoom in, even on a fixed camera or even on our stable FPS cameras. I can, if I'm zoomed in, I can move around with my joystick, right? Okay, and then the big thing is I can go into playback. I can start forward playback, reverse it, stop it, right? And then I can toggle back to live view. If I hit the right button, there we go. The other thing that I've set up is I can toggle through my views, right? So I've got 3 different views set up here. I can toggle through all 3 of those. And once I'm in there, then I can go over and select the camera that I want to use. So that is it. And I thank you guys for your time. Have a great weekend and talk to you guys soon.